Peace, family. This is your brother, Brother Willie Muhammad, and welcome again to another broadcast of Class is in Session. We want to thank each and every one of you all who take the time out to tune into WBOK 12:30 a.m., where it is real talk for real times. And we are happy that you are listening in again to today's show, Class is in Session. And today we want to talk about a subject that, if you've been watching the news as of yesterday, you have seen it. It has basically been all over the news. We've had another mass shooting in the good old country of the United States of America. Unfortunately, there was a young gentleman, his name escapes me, but I'll make sure we get it. He, I think it's Devin Kelly, I think they're identifying him as, that he went into a church right outside of San Antonio in a suburb, and he actually has, as of right now, they said there's over 20 people that have actually been murdered, and there are numerous others who have actually been injured. And so what we want to talk about today with our guests, we want to talk about whether or not places of worship should implement security systems to protect its congregants. And that's the question that we want to be discussing with our guests from the city of Austin. But before we get into the actual interview, I want to play a news clip taken from CNN, and it's about 1 minute and 30 seconds, where they are talking about this unfortunate recent incident that has once again shaken and gripped and terrified the American citizens, and I can imagine even those all over the world. So let's listen to this clip, and we'll be right back to start our discussion with our guest. And this is Brother Willie Muhammad, Classes in Session, WBOK 12:30 a.m., where there's real talk for real time. So let's get into this clip.
Multiple people have been shot at a church in Sutherland Springs, Texas, that is east of San Antonio. CNN's Kaylee Hartung has more on the story. Kaylee.
Well, Fred, we have spoken with officials who say FBI and first responders are on the scene of what I'm told is an active site here in Sutherland Springs, Texas. This is about 30 miles east of San Antonio. And I just spoke with a witness, a woman, a cashier at a gas station just across the street. She told me right around 11:30 Central Time in Sutherland Springs, she heard what she estimated to be 20 shots fired. She says that's when church would be underway for their Sunday service at First Baptist Church there, and customers in her store were calling 911, among those getting the police's attention. She told me that police responded to the scene very quickly. She said she's seen 4 helicopters take off with victims inside, multiple ambulances responding. But again, the FBI and first responders are on the scene. You see a feed here from our affiliate, KSAT, out of San Antonio in Sutherland Springs, Texas, on the scene here as we hope to learn more about what transpired there this morning.
We're back. So you can hear, as she's talking about the devastating incident that took place. So as I said, we have today with us, brothers and sisters, Brother Durce Muhammad. He is a student FOI captain in the city of Austin, Texas, as he refers it to and others refer to, and I refer to as Big Austin. And FOI just simply means the fruit of Islam. And so how you doing, Brother Durce? And thank you for taking time out to do this interview with us at such last moment.
Thank you, Brother Willie. First of all, I want to thank you, and I look forward to sharing some things, but I'm really privileged and honored to be on Classes in Session because it shows like yours that allow the people to kind of hear not only a different perspective, but to hear some things that they may not hear in the quote-unquote mainstream media that will uplift, edify them, but more importantly, put them in a position to make, I think, better choices because they'll have more information to make better choices. So, again, thank you for the privilege, and I'm very honored to be on your show this afternoon.
Yes, sir. Thank you, my brother. So I introduced you as a student FOI captain, and I'm familiar with what that entails, but I know many of our listeners may not be familiar with the inner workings of the Nation of Islam and of various positions. So can you explain to the listening audience what it actually is an FOI captain and what is the responsibilities of an FOI captain in the Nation of Islam?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. The Nation of Islam is set up somewhat in a military structure with the minister, captain, a brother captain, a sister captain, and a secretary, with the minister being responsible for the entire well-being and the spiritual well-being of the believing body. The brother captain and the sister captain, of course, the sister is responsible for the training and the well-being of the sisters that we call the MGT in the Nation of Islam. And the FOI captain is responsible for the well-being of all the believers, both male and female, brothers and sisters, as well as responsible for the care of the minister. But it's not just limited to just the responsibility of making sure that everybody's okay. They're also responsible for making sure that the mosque, the meeting place, or wherever the word of Islam or the word is given, that the persons who are attending, both brothers and sisters or visitors and guests, are secure, they're comfortable, and they're making sure that the environment is conducive to hear the word. So they're responsible for the overall safety and, again, well-being, not only from a spiritual standpoint, but more importantly also from a physical standpoint of any meetings that take place. And not just meetings, brother, because this is not something that we just, we're not just Muslims, or we're not just FOI Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Sunday and during our meeting times, but during the entire time that responsibility is given, that FOI captain is responsible for the overall well-being and safety of all the believers in the mosque.
So, man, thank you for sharing that with the listeners. And I'm just pulling something up right now. When we're talking about, this comes from ABC News, 7 News, and they're talking about this recent shooting in right outside of San Antonio. And the headline is saying that the church shooting in rural Texas now among the top 5 deadliest gun massacres in U.S. history. Of course, they're not talking about what they did in Black Wall Street, but that's another topic. And the first one is the Las Vegas shooting that took place October the 1st, 2017, and that was 58 deaths. The second one is the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, Florida, 49, 2016. The Virginia Tech University shooting in Virginia, April 16, 2007, it was 32 deaths. Then the Sandy Hook, Newton, Connecticut, which was 26 deaths, and it was at the Sandy Hook Elementary School, December 14, 2012. And now the First Baptist Church shooting of Sutherland Springs, Texas. They said at least 26 were killed, and that was November the 5th, 2017. So as we lay the basis for this discussion, I want to talk from about an article that those who are listening can actually go and pull up for themselves. It was printed in the Final Call newspaper, December the 15th, 2015, and the title is of this article, Security Training Forges Muslim and Christian Unity. And in the article, a pastor by the name of Pastor D.Z. Carfield of the Good Hope Missionary Baptist Church, he reached out to our regional student minister of the Southwest Regional Region in the Nation of Islam, Brother Abdul Halim Muhammad, as the article says, for assistance after several instances in his churches which raised security concerns. And it goes further where it says, knowing the Nation of Islam track record of having secured large and small venues as well as weekly meetings without any major incidences, it was his first choice to bring in the FOI to train his men at the church in order to bring about a safe and secure environment for the GHMBC members and guests, which is talking about the Good Hope Missionary Baptist Church. Before we get into the details of the actual training and what you all experienced, just curious, what was some of the, as the article says, several instances in Pastor Carfield's churches that raised security concerns that made him reach out to you all, Brother Durce?
Well, during the course of the day, the church also runs a school, And so on the bottom portion, the second floor has the upper grades, and the bottom portion has a daycare. Across where the church is located is I guess y'all call them canals, but they have a bayou. And across the bayou is a mental health facility where the people in Houston, if they have a particular problem, of course, mental health-wise, they are admitted there. It's kind of low, somebody that may be off the meds or things along those lines. But during the course of the day, they are released, and many of them may be homeless. Some of them may not have family, or if the family hasn't come pick them up, they just cannot stay at the facility. And so they were getting quite a few persons coming there that was not mentally balanced, if you will, and just coming in there on the first floor, and for the most part bothering the workers there. And many of the workers there, of course, were also members of the church. They had security, but the security did not only handle it well, but it was just becoming too prevalent, and there was a concern. But the thing, I guess, that pushed him over the edge, he was teaching 2 Sundays in a row. And as he was teaching, someone came from the back all the way to the front without being stopped by any of the ushers, any of the deacons, and actually came straight up onto the stage. Pastor Cofield is kind of a big guy. He has kind of a sense of street about him, if you will, and he engaged and he interacted with the person, but he was concerned the fact that he came all the way from the back to the front, and although he didn't mean no harm took place, the possibility could have been there. That was the 1 week. In the second week, it happened again. Somebody completely different coming from a different side, and that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. So those incidences right there gave him a grave concern, and then he put a call into, again, as the article talked about, to our regional minister, Dr. Halim, who's also in Houston. And prior to that, we've always had a very good relationship with Good Hope Missionary Baptist Church. And then, again, based on, as the article says, again, on our track record, he asked if there was something that we could do to help train his men, his deacons, as well as they have different men's ministries. And if we could train them and help them and to assist them so that these type of incidences not only won't happen again, but they won't escalate. Because it's, sometimes it's a situation, if you kind of let something continue to go, it'll grow, and grow. As opposed to if you can nip it in the bud, then you don't have an opportunity for others to get ideas. And if they feel that if someone else can do what they did, then they could perhaps take it to another level. So those are the incidents, and those are the things that kind of fostered the brother to reach out and to see what he could do to help in terms of training, what we could do to help in terms of training his men.
Wow. And so as we talk about the training, the article goes further and it says, the training consisted of observation, enhancement drills, personal protection training, crowd and control techniques, weapon disarming tactics, proper handling of people, rostrum security, sanctuary security, and much more. So you all provided all of this for the church. Can you talk about what this, in a little bit more detail, maybe how the activities, how you all were received as you actually delivered and presented this actual training? And so can you share with us, the listeners, regarding that?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Excellent question. One of the first things that helped and assisted is the fact, as you stated before, we came in with a track record of all the different of all the different meetings that we've had, and some of the large meetings. Matter of fact, in Houston, Texas, the largest men's meeting when the Honorable Louis Farrakhan was preparing for the Million Man March, over 35,000 have showed up in arenas across the country, and of course in Houston, New Orleans, and other places. Tens of thousands of persons show up, and without the direct aid of law enforcement, the meetings are manned and controlled by the Nation of Islam, and specific the Fruit of Islam, the FOI, as well as the MGT, but in particular the FOI. And so the track record that we had is something that allowed us that as soon as we started to talk about training, they didn't have to guess on whether or not we knew what we were talking about and we knew what we were doing. And over 80 years, you don't have any, and it's some of the largest gatherings that this country has ever seen, in particular the Million Man March, where there were over 1.8, almost 2 million men showed up. There were no fights, no arrests, none of those things that you would find on a normal basis where you find a large gathering of black people, in particular black men, and none of these things took place. So going into it, we had a opportunity to have open ears because our track record proved and showed that we knew what we were talking about. One of the first things that had to take place too, Brother Willie, was the fact that we weren't there to propagate the faith. We weren't there to evangelize. We weren't there to try to make the members. We weren't trying to sheep steal. We were there to provide a service as brothers because we want for our brother what we want for ourselves. So one of the first things we had to do was to, again, not only share that with them, but let them know and see, and it's very interesting, that there's nothing wrong, and Scriptures backs up the fact that being security-minded is scripturally based. You find in the book of Genesis where it talks about that when the persons were run out of the Garden of Eden, then God put at the gates of the garden some cherubims, which are basically sentinels or security guards, with flaming swords, making sure that nobody came in that was not supposed to be there. And so that shows you right there, as powerful as God is, he could have just, did what he does and said what he said and nothing could have happened. But he made sure by having men there with flaming swords, making sure that people would not enter. So we shared with them, and they saw all through Scriptures. And part of the activities, going to your question, part of the activities initially on our first class was for them to go into the Bible and see where security is all through the Bible, so that they would not feel uncomfortable implementing and executing and putting into place the security measures that under normal circumstances you would think, because I'm in this house of worship, why do we got to do X, Y, and Z? God is sufficient. No, God even makes sure that you got to do your part. He will do his part, but you got to do your part too in making sure that the place that you want to share the word is safe and is conducive to hear the word. So so that was one of the activities that we did, and that laid the base for the rest of it, because it was a six week training, and that laid the base. One other thing in regards to that, in terms of Scripture, you find that even Jesus, when he was praying, when he went to the Garden of Gethsemane, he asked his disciples, "Hey, look, you watch while I pray." Well, again, why would Jesus? Why? Because he knew he was a wanted man and people were after him. But he asked his disciples to basically hold post. In other words, be a watchman. Well, watch while I pray. And of course, you know that as the Scriptures talks about, the disciples fell asleep. Then he came back and he asked them again, "Hey, wake up! I'm glad to go back and pray. Watch while I pray." So these are things, again, that justify the observation. This justifies all the things that we laid out because it can be found in Scripture. So those are some of the activities that we did. That was the first activity to show that it's scripturally based, and then some of the other activities were actually pertinent to what was taking place in that particular church at that particular time.
So, and when we look at the recent shooting that took place in San Antonio, and even what took place, was it in Virginia, in South Carolina, right? Charleston, South Carolina. What do you think could have been done to help avoid those shootings? And let's talk about what do you think could have been done? Something practical that each of those institutions could have done to help prevent that.
But one of the first things is to establish from the outset that this is a place where carnal weapons are not allowed. And because you may not understand or you may forget we are going to check and make sure that carnal weapons or any weapons that are not, or anything, or any contraband that is not going to be, that's going to be harmonious with a peaceful environment will not be allowed in. So that has to be stated, and that has to be put into people's minds at the outset. And so some of the things so when South Carolina, from my understanding, he came in and he was welcomed with open arms and things along those lines. But if there had been a policy and protocol in place, I mean, you're sure everybody's welcome, but just to make sure that we have a meeting that where people don't have to worry about whatever, a gun accidentally going off. These type of things are not allowed in here. And why should they be in a house of worship? If you're there to worship God, what is the fear factor that you have? If it's fear of God and only God, then why do you need to have the gun in there? Because if you're now saying that your God is not strong enough, and that, I know he's strong, but I need to have my weapon on my hip just in case. Well, the mere fact you say just in case, we got to now, some could now actually question where is your faith and where is your belief at. So I think that could have been the first thing, is the establishment of the fact that nothing that is not promotion and promoting peace will be allowed into our sanctuary and to be allowed into our environment. And you will find, I believe now, because of these things, and this is not just the first incident of this church shooting. It was something that happened just a few months ago in Tennessee, where someone came up into his church and shot 5 and killed 5 or 6 people. But in the Nation of Islam, and that is the beauty, that's the strength of the Nation of Islam, it's understood. You come into our check area, and we make it very clear, these are things that are not allowed. Everything out your pocket but your loose change and your dollar bills. Oh, you can't allow that. But it's just a lighter. Well, you may fire something up. What you need a lighter for? No smoking in here, so that has to go. Surely you can't have no weapon. We don't even carry weapons, so we're not going to allow you to carry weapons. What about this mace? Because, sister, you're okay. It's all right. Nothing's going to happen while you're in here. So I understand when you may encounter out there, but in here, that's not necessary. You are entering into a house where we are promoting and we are establishing and we are practicing peace. And so therefore these things are not necessary while we are hearing the word of God. And so, Brother Willie, going again directly to your question, those are some things, the establishment at the outset, that our houses of worship are for just that, to worship God's word, and anything that is not promoting that will not be allowed into the sanctuary. Or better yet, even onto the property where people can perhaps have access to it to hurt other people.
Okay, thank you. And so what we're doing, we're coming up on our first break, and so we'll come back on the other half of this break, and we'll continue our conversation with Brother Durce Muhammad from Austin, Texas, who is joining us in our discussion of whether or not places of worship should begin to start implementing security systems to protect themselves and their congregants. And we're talking about in light of the recent shooting that has taken place, and we'll be back to talk more about that. So this is your Brother Willie Muhammad, and this is Class is in Session. So stay tuned. We'll be right back on the other side to conclude and finish this, this interview. So stay tuned. We're back, brothers and sisters, and thank you all for continuing to listen to Classes in Session with your Brother Willie Muhammad. If you haven't heard the first half of the show, we've been interviewing Brother Durce Muhammad, who is a student FOI captain in the city of Austin, Texas. And he has experience in, I guess we will say security. We'll also say event security, personal protection, and things like that as well. He shared earlier or discussed earlier with us how they were invited to go to a church and help train the male members in the church in security on how to secure their facility after concerns by the local pastor about some instances that took place in his actual church. So we want to continue this discussion, and I'll start with this. I did some research in preparation for today's show, and it says, I came across something that said over the last 17 years, there has been a little over 780 deadly attacks that have taken place in United States places of worship, right? And it says, so I want to ask you the question, why do you think, Brother Durce, there isn't a greater urgency in the actions of churches to combat this rise in violence that is taking place?
Well, I think the urgency is coming because of the frequency that's taking place. But prior to that point, going to your answering your question, the lack of urgency is because I think, again, we don't read scriptures and put it in a very practical, in a very real, and bring it up to modern day sense. As I shared with you before, one of the things that, again, allowed us to really get the ears and allowed the engagement and the participation level, and let me just share this with you real quick, and it was a very high participation level because, to be quite honest, they had like a wait and see, or let me see what they're talking about type attitude. But at the end of the 6 weeks, I can very happily say that almost at what we started off with, we end up with 90% of those persons we started with finished the entire thing. So they went the entire 6 weeks. But again, this lack of understanding and knowing that God Himself that has shown that security, being vigilant, and making sure that earthly ways are not entered into the house or entered into an environment where believers may be at. It's all through scriptures. And I think the inability or the lack of pointing that out puts us at this, puts persons in the house of worship in the church service that this is a safe haven just because. But as we see the rise of incivility, as we see the rise of savageness and beastiness coming out of the human being in this country and around the world, but in specific and in particular in this country, there's no place that is off limits when a person loses their mind, when a person the savageness comes out of. There's no place that's off limits because, quite frank, these persons are coming up in there. They don't look at those places as a house of worship. They look at that as a building where people happen to be at. They don't understand and they don't look at the dynamics of this as people who are trying to, worship their God in whatever form or fashion. They just look at this as a place. I'm mad. It's an easy target, and then I can go ahead and express and display my madness on them. And so I think that's what the problem is, and that's why this lack of urgency, because, and excuse my language, but we're spooky. We think that God is going to come down and put this blanket on us, but God helps those who help themselves. So we got to make sure that we do what we're responsible for on this earthly plane, and then God will take care of the rest.
Wow. So you think in regards to how some people interpret the scripture in regard and thinking that God will just do all of the work and they'll be protected, be it by the prayer rug, blood of the lamb, or whatever it may be, that leads to this inability to do that. No doubt. I mean, and again, that's why our first class deals with going and look, it's a homework assignment that we give. We give 2 or 3 ourselves, and then they're responsible for going into the Bible and finding out and sharing with us. And brother, we have some that we already know, but they were coming with quite a few that they were showing in that God was security was taking place. There was one, as a matter of fact, it was at Good Hope, where one of the brothers pulled out the fact that they were the walls, I think, of Jericho, and then they were marching around it. But there were sentinels, there were some guards that were making sure that they were and keeping them in order. So use that for crowd control. So it's all through the scriptures.
where security and those that are responsible for making sure that the word is protected did just that. In fact about it, one of the scriptures where you see where Jesus, where they come to grab him, where the Roman authorities grab him, and Peter pulled out his sword. Well, that means Peter was packing. And he cut the Romans' ears off. He just happened to reach for Jesus. That tells me that Peter was Jesus' personal security. He was an armor bearer for Jesus. What was he doing with the sword? If everything is just so, well, we with God's man, he can turn water into wine. He can walk on water. He can make the waves and the storm still. What you walk around with the sword for, Peter? Well, because that was his responsibility to make sure that nothing happened, and he went into action. And then Jesus, to fulfill Scripture, hey, this is something I got to go through. But go ahead. But then he said there's going to be a time when we have to unsheathe our sword now. But my point is that Peter was packing and making sure that Jesus was being protected. So that's important. We got to take that view. And let me real quick. I want to just say this, Brother Willie, that this training was not just done by me alone. This is on our first training. We had you talked about the different components. We had Brother Jeffrey Muhammad, Brother William Muhammad, who not only long members of the Nation of Islam, but Brother Jeffrey Muhammad has secured some very high-level celebrities and things along those lines, along with Brother William. Brother William also has trained peace officers here in the city of and around the state here in the state of Texas. So he's very highly skilled in terms of weapons and self-defense. And then also we had Brother Student Captain Stephen Muhammad, along with Brother Brian Muhammad, and again, Brother William, who helped to train at the Good Hope Missionary Baptist Church to do the different components and the different classes that allowed us to be successful on both those occasions.
Right. And you mentioned about the trainings. There was a 9-week course. How
6 weeks. 6 weeks.
6 weeks. How frequent did you all meet within the week, and what was the time duration of each of the trainings?
Once a week for 3 hours. Once a week, 2 hours. So it was a total of 12 hours. And then the last class, which was really the 7th week, was a graduation, because all those who participated received a certificate, but you had to have, your participation had to be such that you had to make so many classes to be able to fulfill and get your certificate, because it was a consistent build-up. The first week, then the second week was built on the first week, the third week was built on the second and first week, and so on and so on. So everything added to everything. We had a lot of hands-on. We had a lot of role-playing. We had a lot of different scenarios that make sure that we weren't just it wasn't just talking to the brothers. And another thing, too, Brother Willie, a lot of the training took place in such a way where it was customized for that particular church. One of the things that the pastor was concerned about, and he was actually, I'm speaking of Good Hope now, Pastor Cofield, was the fact that in Texas you have, a lot of persons have CHL concealed handgun licenses. And so they were bringing it in the church. And one of the things that he feared was that if something jumped off, excuse my language, that someone from across the aisle would start shooting, then another one would start shooting. So people pulling their guns out from their purses and from their hips. And now you got all this crossfire. Nobody gets hit but innocent people. So and then you had peace officers who, of course, they go to church and they constantly carry their guns because they are authorized to do so. And so he said, you have a situation where someone would panic and you can turn into the wild, wild west in there. So he was very, very concerned. That was a very, very high concern of his, that, what do we do and how do we not only stop this panic, but he was very, and he still may be, but he was very, very on the cusp of considering having a check procedure before coming into his church because of that.
Wow.
Just imagine that, Brother Willie. Again, you got about 7 or 8 persons in there legally, have the concealed handguns. They can do it. They bring it in the church. Something kicks off. One of them pulls it off. All they hear is pow, pow, pow. Another person starts pulling, and they're across the way. Someone from the balcony. They're shooting. People are ducking and hiding. And then at the end of the day, 2 or 3 people may have been shot that had nothing to do with it, but because of the crossfire and other things, we have a tragedy.
Have you all did any follow-up to see how they are implementing what they all learned from you?
Sir, excellent question. We would give them what we would call we call it a controlled visit, letting them know, hey, look, we're coming by. We just want to see how you're doing, and then just kind of seeing some of the things that we put into play, and then we would come by without even, unannounced, and then just kind of see and make sure that some of the things that they put into play, that we trained on and that we put into play, because part of what we did too, we just didn't train them, but we also implemented and put in different types of strategies, different types of protocols that was customized and conducive for their particular location, their building size, et cetera, et cetera. And so we wanted to make sure that they continued to do that, and so we would come up unannounced to make sure that they were doing just that. So, yes, to answer your question, and follow-up is very important because, again, we're not playing. We didn't want to play with our time. We're not playing with their time, and we're there seriously trying to make sure that the things that we shared with them, that they would implement it and execute it so that, again, they can have a continued safer environment to deliver the word.
And since you all have, since that training you provided with that church, have you all had the opportunity to provide training for any other houses of worship?
Very good question.
Or even mosque or anything?
2 things that took place after the church. The one thing that I can honestly say that the men of God, the pastors and ministers, especially if on the Christian, from the Christian perspective, they talk amongst one another, and the word of mouth really helped in regards to, I guess, knocking down either some barriers or perhaps some misgivings, because if so and so did it, well, it must be all right, and if so and so did it, well, let me try it out. And so we've had many calls and many offers, and really what has taken place is really just trying to match up schedules, because again, it's not no one-time thing; it's an ongoing thing. And so, as it's interesting you said that, as early as 2 weeks ago, we're working with the church now to get our schedules together so that we can sync up and go into another training piece. Because again, it's 6 weeks in a row, and the consistency of it is important too. We don't want to do 1 week, skip 2 weeks, and another week. No, as an instructor and as learner, since this is class in session, that the learning process works when you have a level of consistency, a level of redundancy, and more importantly, a level of frequency, so that you can have the things that you're trying to impart to your student stays with them.
That's something, man. And that's good. That's definitely good to hear. In light of this recent shooting that has taken place, do you think these type of incidents will help people will validate the practice of the Nation of Islam, which has been something that has been practiced since the mid-1900s in our meetings?
But that's an excellent question, and I'll be quite honest, brother, because since I'm going to be very truthful for you. We have to really be, and I'm speaking now on the Nation of Islam, we're going to have to be really humble in regards to not getting to the point where we talk about, I told you so. Because we've been trying to express, we've been impressing this and expressing this since 1930. And so, and everybody would laugh at us. Some people would not even come, talking about, I'm not going to get this, I'm not going to get, why they got to search me? But yet and still they'll submit when they go to the airport or to the court. But when they come into us, but it all boils down to the lack of respect of black authority. They just don't want to be told what to do by black folks. But, yes, this will now, again, and again, like I said, we're just going to have to be very humble and be mindful and respectful of the fact that we have been doing this. Because we could pound our chest and say, man, look, we told you this, that, and other, but I think the right thing and the proper thing for us to do is say, hey, look, we're here. We want for our brother and sister what we want for ourselves. Please, here's our number. Give us a call. We will help and we will assist in any way that we can, because at the end of the day, we want all of God's children, those who believe in the one God, and they're trying to do right and trying to make themselves better for themselves, their family, and for the community. We want to make sure that the inspired word that they hear coming from their minister or from their pastor is something that they can hear and listen to without worrying about whether or not someone is going to hit them upside the head or worry about going into the parking lot, someone's going to snatch their purse. They can feel good about it, and when they're good about it, that means the word can be received better, and more importantly, hopefully when it's received better, they can act on it and they can become better persons for their family, for themselves, and ultimately the community. So yes, I think our phones are going to be ringing off the hook, and we look forward to helping to serve our people and to help them and to assist them so that they can become, to be in a safe environment, as we have been in a safe environment for over 80-some years.
And what are you, for those who may be listening here and listening to this broadcast, and even those who are listening in different cities and states outside of Louisiana, how could, if they're interested in reaching out to you and your team to provide training for their church, for their mosque, because we're talking about churches, but, even mosques are in need of it, because we've had incidents we've seen where people have ran into mosques. And what's interesting, when they're talking about these shootings, I don't really see those shootings that have taken place in these different masjids. They're not even mentioned. So if people want to reach out to you, or how could they get in contact with you all to find out about the possibility of coming to their church or their place of worship to receive this training?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Let me. I'm gonna give you my number, and let me just share this with you also, because right there in New Orleans, you have a very capable and very competent and very experienced captain, Brother Student Captain Durce Muhammad, who is just as versed and can definitely assist. But I'm gonna give my number out, but in 832-752-8699. That's 832-752-8699, Brother Durce Muhammad. But when you give me a call, I'll find out where you are. But I'm very comfortable and confident in the fact that the city, no matter where you call from, that there are brothers there that can assist and can help. But I do want you to give me a call, because that's an excellent question, Brother Willie, because our team is just that. It's a team, and there's a way that you have to go in and to enter into these churches. Again, you're not coming in there to evangelize. You're not coming in there to pound your chest. You can listen to me, because we're there to serve, and we're there to assist, because they have some things that are in place that are very good. And what we want to do is to enhance that and then improve on some things that can help it even be better. But there's a way that that we do that. And so, and let me share this with you too, Brother Willie, if I can, and that is, I want to take my hat off to Pastor Cofield and Pastor Remus Wright, because in going into and asking us to train, they told us prior to, say, look, I'm doing this, I let my congregation know, but I'm already getting pushback. I'm already getting, why we got to bring the Muslims in? Why we got to do that? And they, again, because of not only of our track record, but the success rate that we have, it would have been foolish of them not to, at the very minimum, hear what we have to say, because of, again, our successful 80-year track record of not having any incidences. And I'm pleased to say, by God's grace, that after they completed the 6 week, some of the brothers would come up and say, man, look, I was one of those ones who gave Pastor a hard time, but I'm very pleased and very glad that you did. Another brother came up and said, I was with you the whole time, and I was trying to tell people to come, but now I'm going to show them my certificate, and I'm going to make sure that when you do part 2, that they show up, because, and listen to these words, because what you shared with us, if they miss it, it could cost them their life. Because it just wasn't limited to sharing with them things that secure their houses of worship, but also their homes and their women and their family. Because the principles that we gave and shared with them, they could apply to when they go to their house. How do you approach a house if you see lights on, lights off? How do you be more observant when you see certain things that are out of place? You got to know that they're in place and to notice that they're out of place. But you got to practice that. So we have drills that do this type of thing. So it's just overall just a very good thing. But if you contact us, we can take it further, and we look forward again to serve, brother. And we want just as many other houses of worship to have our same track record that we have.
Wow. And in closing, we'll take this last brief question. We'll ask you, do you know, so far what we've seen this happen in, this white churches. We had this incident in South Carolina. Do you think that this may also we may see an uptick in this current environment of these type of shootings in black churches?
Oh, yes, sir. Because the sickness and the savagery and this bestiality is not just limited to Caucasians. Sad to say that some of our brothers and sisters, in trying to be so much like others, and then couple that with self-hatred, will snap, and they'll come into a place. And the sad thing, Brother Willie, is that when they see, it's almost like one of them things that if it's okay for them to do X, Y, and Z, then it's okay for us. And you'll see us mimic our enemy, or the enemy of God. And I'm speaking the enemy of God as anyone who opposes righteousness. It's not a color, but anyone who opposes righteousness, you'll see them kind of do the same type of thing. So I think it's imperative, and it's very important for us now to quickly to be proactive and prevent these type of things. And one of the best ways to set and to establish the fact that type of thing is not going to be allowed no more. That you just cannot come in and expect to bring anything within our sanctuary or within in our walls that is not promoting and conducive to a peaceful environment. Well, we used to do this and that. Well, we used to do a lot of things, but time dictates the agenda, and we can no longer allow certain things. Brother, you used to be able to smoke on airplanes. You used to be able to think about that, but it used to be smoke cigarettes on the airplane, the same tube. They had a smoking section in the back, as if you couldn't smell it in the front in that one big tube. Wow. So a lot of things change. And so you talk about, so if you're not willing to change for the better, then death will come upon you quickly. And things have to change. There has to be now being mindful of, because of the state. As the scriptures talks about, this is a time that we have never seen before. Time now dictates that we move towards being better in our thinking and being more cautious in our thinking and proactive. And we have been blessed. I'll close with this point, that we have been blessed with the teachings from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and now under the leadership of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, that allows us to be not only proactive, but puts us in a position to point to our track record as well as point to our success rate to help others so that they can be just as successful as we are in terms of having a safe environment to deliver the Word of God.
Yes, sir. Well, brother, we thank you for taking the time out with us to come on and talk about this situation. And I hope that those who are listening, if you are a member of a church or in any organization, you feel you can benefit from this training, don't hesitate to reach out to brothers, because just as he said, and those brothers who you all trained in that church, you can be saving not only the lives of your congregants, but also the lives of your family. So This is your brother Willie Muhammad. We're closing out on another broadcast of Classes in Session, WBOK, 12:30 a.m., where there's real talk for real times. And we look forward to you all tuning in again on next Monday at 3 p.m. So we hope that you enjoyed the show. So we look forward to seeing you all, hearing from you all on next week. Peace.